thank you for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. And today I'm filming probably the latest ever best books of the year so far video, because it's today the 30th of July, so we're pretty much into August. I don't know if I'll have a chance to upload this today or not, we'll see. So it could even be August, but people said they still wanted to see it, so I'm going to just crack on and do it anyway. I did stop with the choice of books in June, so all of these books are books that I read in the first half of the year. There's no books that I read this month in this list. So let's just crack on. I have put them in order. I made a bullet journal spread, and when I was sticking the books in, I did actually put them into a semblance of an order. So the first book on my list is a book from the Women's Prize, and I think I'm the only person who really enjoyed this book because I really liked it, but I didn't really hear anyone else give a particularly favourable opinion of the book. I listened to it on audio and I really enjoyed the audio book. And it is Homesick by Jennifer Croft. I just really liked this book, and I think other people found it, I don't know if they found it a bit sparse, but I really enjoyed it. And so this was originally published, I believe, in Spanish as a memoir. Then it was translated to English and made into a fiction book, and the characters' names were obviously changed. And then it was listed for the Women's Prize, and it didn't make the shortlist. But it's about two sisters, Amy and Zoe, and the younger sister develops an illness which turns out to be a brain tumour. And the older sister, who is our main protagonist, it's about her relationship with her sister, and it's about her relationship with translation and falling in love for the first time and going to college, and family dynamics and what it's like to have a sick sibling. And it's all told in vignettes, which are quite small. And I had the audio version, and it came with a PDF file of all the photographs which are in the book. And I'm not sure that that was the case in the edition that was listed for the Women's Prize, but my version had these photos in, and it would describe, because I was listening to it, it would describe each photo, but then you could actually look at the photo in the PDF file. And I really liked looking at the photos as well. And I think part of the thing that I really liked was I really liked the narrator, and I feel like she really brought it to life for me. And I just really liked the sibling relationship, and I just found that very realistic. And I think I really like books with siblings in, because there's a few books that I've read this year where they've had sibling relationships that I've really enjoyed. I don't think I have too much more to say about this book, other than if that sounds like it's for you, then go ahead and read it, because I thought it was fantastic and I think it should have got more buzz than it did. The next book is a non-fiction essay collection which I listened to on Audible, narrated by the narrator herself, and that is Bread and Wine by Shauna Niequist. And I think I found out about this book because there was a reading challenge I was doing at one point in time where I had to read a book about food. And I found this and I sort of saved it, and then I just fancied listening to it recently. And it was amazing. So I'm not really an essay collection person, but as I recently found out, it's more that I don't seem to gel with essay collections written by journalists, and Shauna isn't a journalist. So this is basically essays about food, the way that food brings us together, the stories that we share around the table, the way that families come together over food. She loves cooking, and there's a lot of there's a lot about food obviously in this, and about her learning to cook different things, and about experiments that she does in the kitchen and stuff like that. But it's just really about how food and love and family and friends all come together around the table, and the stories that we share over food. And it was just so heartwarming and uplifting, and I love food and although I love food writing. And Shauna is Christian, and it does talk about her faith as part of the book, but it's not, in my opinion, a preachy book or a book that's like, I wouldn't call it like Christian non-fiction. I would just call it a food memoir or food essay collection where Shauna's faith Shauna's faith comes into it, but it's not overwhelming in the book. So if you're a person who would feel maybe put off by that, I would say probably don't be, because it doesn't overwhelm the book. And I just thought that the collection was fantastic, and I definitely want to read more that she writes. Number 8 is a classic, which I buddy read with my friend Jo, and this is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. This was my first classic this wasn't my first classic. This was my first Elizabeth Gaskell book, and it won't be my last because I really, really loved it. This is, for those who haven't read it, it's set to start off with in the south of England, within a pretty countryside village with the Hales family. The dad is the local pastor or vicar, and he has a daughter, Margaret, and a wife, and he has sort of a crisis in faith, and he feels that he can't honestly live in his tied cottage and be a pastor anymore, because he doesn't really, his faith feels on shaky ground. So he decides he's going to move his family to the north of England, to an industrial town, whether it's a mill town, very different to what they're used to, and he's going to go there and tutor men and boys. And Margaret and her mum are like really not happy about this at all. But they go up there with the dad, and it's a very different way of life for them. And what Elizabeth Gaskell does in a really, really interesting way is that she shows you different living conditions, different arguments for things, and convinces you that that viewpoint is correct. And then she shows you another viewpoint from a different character, and then you question everything you thought the first time, and she does it really well. So we have John, who is from a very poor background, and he has built his way up to be a mill owner. And then he's kind of a wealthy person who has come from a very impoverished background. Then we have some of the mill workers who are on strike and who are really unhappy with working conditions and feel that they can't live any kind of decent life with the conditions that they have. And Margaret is involved with both sides of the argument, and because of that, like I say, it really shows us different points of view at the time, and you stand in each person's shoes and feel like how you might feel. It's not something that's hard to read. It's not like extremely wordy or anything like that. It's good going plot, as well as the characters who you do really feel like you get to know. It's just really, really great. I loved reading Elizabeth Gaskell, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of her as well. And at number 7 is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. So this is one that we read for book club. Otherwise, I may not have read it because the cover kind of put me off. The cover looks very sort of non-literary, and I don't mean that I guess I kind of do mean in a snobby way. I was going to say I don't, but sometimes when you have a cover like this, it just kind of makes me think it's not going to be well written, and actually it's really, really well written, and it's not sort of chick lit. I hate that phrase, but it's not. It's like it's a good, really good book. So we're following Elizabeth Zott, who is a woman chemist, and she is working in the 60s in America in a very male environment, and she isn't taken seriously. Her work is stolen by her male colleague. She's sexually assaulted. She's she has like horrible things happen to her. It's part of her career. And she meets this other guy called Cal Evans, who is another chemist, and they really like each other. They're very similar. They're very into their work and everything, and they become a couple, and people think that she's just with him because he'll further her career, which is completely untrue. They get a dog called 630, who is the best dog ever in book history. He's just amazing, and it follows Elizabeth and her family as she goes through her career, and then she ends up this is no spoiler because you can even see it on the front cover. She ends up hosting a cooking show on TV, but it's very different to what you'd expect a cooking show of the 1960s to be, because she wants to bring in her science and feminist views as well, which is really good. And so I really like this. It covers some really serious topics, but it's also uplifting and made me feel really grateful for women like Elizabeth Zott, who paved the way many decades ago for women who work in science careers like myself now. And I thought it was fabulous. I really enjoyed it. Number 6 is another book that was on the Women's Prize long list, which didn't make the shortlist, and I was gutted because I absolutely love this book. Again, I don't think I was in the huge majority of loving it, but it was Memphis by Tara M. Stringfellow. This book was an intergenerational book about the women in a family. So we start in the mid-90s with our main protagonist, who is called Joan. And Joan is a teenage girl, and she is with her younger sister, who I think is called Maya, and her mum. And they are fleeing because the mum is in a relationship which is a violent relationship. And they're fleeing and going back to their ancestral family home, where the mum's sister, or Joan's aunt, now lives with her son. And the family home was built by Joan's Joan's grandparents, who have now both died, but we still hear their stories, and their stories are sad and amazing. And so this focuses on what it's like for Joan to come back to this house, to learn about the trauma that has happened to previous generations of her family, and about starting afresh, because Joan is a really talented artist and she wants to do art as her career, and it's about the development of her art and her kind of starting a new life away from all the sort of previous trauma. But the love that's in the family also keeps her grounded in that place as well. And I just thought I loved the characters in this book. I found them very real. I loved the interactions. I loved the friendships in this book as well. Like, her aunt has a hair salon in her basement, and then all the sort of community of women come and get their hair done, and they all share like fun times with music and stories and stuff. And there's older generations and younger generations and how they interact. There's so much love in this book between the different women, and there's so many strong characters who've been through like such trauma, but they're still so strong. And one trigger warning, there is a sexual assault or a rape on a child in this book, and it is by another child, and it is really hard to read, but it is very short. The actual scene is just the consequences of that scene obviously rebound for a longer time, but the actual scene itself is as least traumatic as it can be for that. So yeah, that is a big trigger. But I thought it was an amazing book. I know there's been some comment on the author's behaviour online, but I had to just not think about that and just get immersed in the book, and I'm so glad I did, because it was a masterpiece. I loved it. Book number 5 is another masterpiece. This is another book that I buddy read with Joe, and this is Beloved by Toni Morrison. I think that buddy reading this book was a really, really good way to read it, because even though this book is quite short, it's only sort of not even 300 pages. It took us quite a long time to read this, because I feel like we really delved into Toni Morrison's amazing writing. It's something where you could just pick out single sentences and think about them, because she's such a gift at, in the literary arena. And this is a really, really heartfelt book. This book is about Setha, and she is a slave on a plantation called Sweet Home in Kentucky, and we're in the mid 1800s, and Setha has escaped, and she's going to stay with Hallie, who is her mother-in-law, and Hallie is free. And all we know about Setha is that she has children, but she had a daughter who's died, and on her tombstone it just says beloved, because she couldn't even get dearly beloved. She just had beloved on the tombstone. And then one day this teenage girl called Beloved comes back to where they live, and no one knows what's going on because Beloved died. And so this is just, it deals with a lot of trauma, but her writing is just so amazing that it eases the pain of some of the trauma, but it also makes you feel it even more deeply at the same time. It's about, like, again, relationships between people, and there's like partnerships, there's family relationships, there's mother-child relationships, and there's also the relationships between the slaves before they leave Sweet Home. And some of the trauma in here is like very hard to deal with, but this book is just wonderful, and I can't wait me and Jo are going to buddy read more Toni Morrison, because again, I just think, even though I've already read a few of her books, I want to reread them again as the buddy reads, just so that we can pick them apart in the same way that we did with this one, and I feel like really get the most out of what is such a phenomenal body of work that Toni Morrison has. At number 4, another incredible book, which was Night Calling by Layla Motley. This is a book that I cannot understand why it wasn't on the women's prize list, because it was so much better than some of the books that were on the list, in my humble opinion. This is a book about Kia, who is a teenage girl who is living with her brother. Her mum is in prison. Her dad is, I can't remember if her dad died or if he's just missing from their lives. I can't remember. But anyway, it's just her and her older brother. They're trying to make ends meet. The rent's getting put up. They live in a poor neighbourhood, and her brother is trying to make a career as a rapper. He's not very good, but he thinks he's really good. Some of his friends are really good, and his uncle has made a successful career, and he's really trying to follow in his uncle's footsteps, but he doesn't have the talent. And she keeps saying to him, please, 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 can you just get a job and help us, because we can't survive financially. She's had to come out of college, college, and she's trying to make ends meet. There's also a young boy who lives in one of the apartments opposite theirs, whose mum is addicted to crack, and she is trying to look after him as well, make sure that he has food and clothes and gets to school and stuff, because he's quite a little bit younger. And she basically, one day she goes to a bar and she's been drinking, and she's underage, but her friend works at the bar and lets her in, and she goes to leave, and then basically this guy comes and rapes her, and at the end he goes, here's your money, and he thinks that she's a sex worker. She's not a sex worker, and she suddenly thinks, like, maybe this is the way that I can get money to try and help survive. So it's basically her journey into sex work through desperation. And also she then starts getting paid for sex by the police, and this is based on a true case where there was a whole group of police officers who were using sex workers, who were then sometimes paying them, sometimes not, saying like, well, we'll arrest you for this, so we're not actually going to pay you tonight because this is what you need to do to keep out of prison and stuff like this. And she's still a minor as well. So it's like this horrific abuse of power by the police, and also this super sad story about what some people have to do just to make ends meet, just to keep a roof over their heads. And she's so young, and she's just an amazing character. And although this book sounds like incredibly sad, which it is, it's very like moving, and you really sort of feel like you're walking in her shoes for a little while. And again, like the writer, the author of this book, Loveland Foundation, she's young and she's such a talent. Like it's just amazing, this book. I listened to this one on audio again, and it was just brilliantly narrated as well, and I can't speak more highly of it. Wonderful book. In at number 3 is Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson, who I've spoken about quite a few times in the last few months because I saw him in Norwich as part of the North Norwich Festival. He was amazing. He was such a lovely guy. And this book I read in anticipation of seeing him, and wow, what a book. Wow. This is a really small book, but it's incredibly written. I think this year I've just discovered so many new to me writers who have this amazing talent, and he is one of them. He writes about 2 unnamed characters, a male and a female protagonist. We're following the male protagonist the most. He is about 20-ish, 19, 20, and he is he lives in London. It's following what it's like to be like a young black man in London, and about his connections with other people. So it's not, like he said himself, that his books don't really have a plot, and it's kind of got a loose plot, but he's sort of, it's the early days of a relationship with the girl in the book, and it's about both of them sort of feeling seen, and especially him. He tells us of things that are happening to him and his friends, like he'll be walking just to like a friend's house and he'll be pulled up by the police and told, well, you look like someone who's committed robberies in this area, and he'll be shoved up against a wall, and and he'll be assaulted, and he's done nothing. He's just walking to his friend's house. And so then he has all these kind of really horrible things that are happening to him like that, but he's also got this really deep connection with other people in his life. And it talks about moments of connection, like if he goes into a jazz club and it's mainly black people who are in the club, and how he can like make eye contact with a bartender and there's just this instant connection that he feels understood, and how there's all these like connections through the book of how it feels for him being black and being a man, and how he's treated by society, and how it feels to him when he finds someone who understands him. And there's also a Spotify playlist that goes with this, so there's a lot of music in this book, and there's a lot of pieces of art which you can also look up. They're all real pieces of art, and you can look at them while they're being described in the book as well. And all I can say is, really, because it's hard to describe this book because it's not like full of plot, but if you want to understand a bit more about what it can be like to be a young black guy in London, and if you want to read incredible writing, then this is a book for you. And it's wonderful, really wonderful. My top 2 are not going to be any surprise because I keep talking about them in videos lately, and you guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about them, but I'm going to talk about them again anyway because they're my top 2. So 1 and 2 are really hard to distinguish between them, but at number 2 I've got A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. This is a book by another very young, incredibly talented author about a family who are from India who've moved to America. They are a Muslim family. They start off as just the parents, and then they have children. They have 2 girls, Hadia and Huda, and then a son, Amal. He's the youngest, and it's about what it's like for the children to grow up in America in a Muslim community, what it's like for the parents to worry about their children growing up in a culture that's very different to their own, with different norms and different rules and things. September the 11th happens in the course of the story as well, so people then who are friends will then turn on this family and things. It's mainly focusing on the relationships between the parents and the children and the siblings, because at the beginning of the book it starts on Hadia's wedding day, and Amal hasn't been with the family for a really long time, and Amal's going to come to the wedding, but we know that they haven't seen him for a lot of years, and they're kind of worried what it's going to be like when he comes. Is he going to fall out with anybody? We don't know what happened. And then we go right back in time, and we build up slowly towards the moment where we find out what happens and why Amal isn't part of the family anymore. And the reasons why are incredibly well written, and the sort of the desperation of the parents seeing their son going through really difficult things and not knowing how to help him is done so beautifully. The relationship between Amal and his father, I've never really read a relationship written that well, and just how they love each other so much, this family, but they just sometimes they can't tell each other like what's going on, and they can't help each other even though they desperately want to. And I can't tell you how wonderful this book is. I just like the end. The end just got me so bad. Like, oh, it was just so emotional and so beautiful, and I just want everyone to read it. And then my final book that I need to mention is my book of the year so far, which is Bridge of Clay by Marcus Zusak. So The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak is what I always say is my favourite book of all time. I've reread it lots of times, and Bridge of Clay did not disappoint. I got this in hardback, and I don't know why I let it sit on the shelf for like 5 years or something before I read it, but I did. This is quite a big book, but it's very easy to read because there's loads of dialogue and stuff, and there's not like the pages aren't heavy like at all, as you can see. So it's not a long read. This is about the Dunbar brothers, 5 boys who are growing up in Australia with no parents. The mum dies of cancer, and we follow that journey. We go back and forward in time quite a bit in this book, and the mum has already died at the beginning. The dad is absent. We know the dad's gone. We don't know really what happened. And we go back and piece together different things through the boy's lifetime. The oldest brother is the brother who tells us the story, but Clay, who is I think is the second to youngest, or maybe the middle brother, is the one who we focus on. And we learn about Clay growing up, falling in love for the first time, reconnecting with his dad, building this bridge with his dad, like a physical and a metaphorical bridge that he's building with his dad. And it's about, again, siblings, like the boys together. They make you laugh, they scrap, they fight, they beat each other up. 5 minutes later, they're best mates again. They have animals like a donkey and stuff who come into the house. They name their pets after philosophers. They are just these incredible boys, and the mum holds them all together even though she's no longer with them. And we hear the mum's journey through dying of cancer as these boys are growing up, and what it's like over those years when she's sick, and what it's like for her to leave them behind. And that bit is just like, again, another like real feeling in the chest, especially if you're a mum. Like, yeah, it's really, don't read this if you can't read about death of a parent, because this book is, quite emotionally intense, but with also a really good mix of humour and boyishness, is what I can say, that lifts you out of those really sad moments as well. And I loved Clay falling in love for the first time, like his coming of age story. It's just, I love it so much. And both with this and A Place for Us, I can't ever imagine not reading them again. I have to read them again. And I don't reread that many times, but those books I really, really want to reread again. So yeah, sorry if this has been a long video. I will edit it down if I can. But you know, when you're just passionate about certain books and you just really want to tell everyone about them and make them feel as passionate about them as you do. So tell me if you've read any of those, or if I've made you want to read any. If you've done a best books of the year video, tell me, just so I can make sure that I've watched it. I have watched quite a few, so I may have already watched it, but tell me anyway. And I hope you're having a lovely week. I hope you have a wonderful second half of the reading year, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.